I realized that you were. So I grew up always being artistic, but not necessarily doing anything with those kind of that intuition. So I got to community college. I went to Sierra College. Any Sierra College people? Love that. And I took a black and white photography course and just kind of fell in love with that. I was going to school for medicine, not graphic design or anything art related. And about 3 years in, I graduated from Sierra with a biology degree, moved to Sac State, and was about a year away from graduating when I decided I don't like medicine or biology or anything of that sort. And so I decided to kind of pursue, hey, how's it going? To pursue graphic design and photography. I didn't know in what capacity that might be. I just knew that I wanted to do that. I've been doing photography all while going through biology courses. And knew that I enjoyed that, but I just didn't know how it translated here. The photography program here I knew nothing about. I heard lots of great things about the graphic design program. And I felt like, all right, I'm already practicing photography on the side. Might as well, you know, try and become more well-rounded and try and like open up my skill set while at the same time practicing photography on my free time. So I went to the design program, came to these meetings and learned what it took to get into the design program. How many pre-designers are there in there? Okay, sweet. So you're like figuring it out, kind of the initial rush of like understanding what it is to be a designer and to be in this field. It's awesome. So yeah, I went through the design program and moved to New York right after I graduated in 2021. I think I was mentioning to a few of you guys, like the last time I was in this classroom was February or early March of 2020. So it's very weird to be back there. But yeah, so I moved to New York. I had no job prospects. There was no like, you know, contract signed to join a position anywhere. I just knew that I wanted to be there and wanted to try being creative out in New York. And so I moved there and flip through these first few slides. There's just photography work. And my intuition has always been like kind of fashion photography meets design and interior design and a little bit of fashion and a little bit of landscape work. But when I moved to New York, I started working as a freelance designer, kind of creating brands. So I'm running out of photos to show. I'm like, oh. And yeah, landed a few, you know, small gigs, kind of like keeping me afloat and paying my rent. It took about 2 months to find a single client. So it means 2 months of not getting paid and paying New York rent, which was sick. Totally how I drew it up, Mom. And then eventually kind of leveraged the design work I was doing to buy myself time to go and do photography work. I realized very early on that I didn't like working as a designer in like the capacity that I was doing. So I felt like I had really good ideas, but the execution level, I was just not there. And I knew that I was at a much higher execution level at the photography level. So I decided that I wanted to, you know, use my skills to kind of pay the bills. But as soon as I had an opportunity to jump ship, I wanted to do so. So I started working at a studio, and that was kind of what got me back into photography. I was running a photography studio, which was essentially just like booking clients, magazines, other brands that needed to use the space, other photographers that needed to use the space, and understanding what the industry did, which, you know, sustained me for a really long time. And all the while I was kind of picking up my own clients photographically and figuring out how to make a living just doing that, which is from a freelance perspective, always kind of feast or famine. You go through like really big waves of like lots of work and like overwhelmed, and then there's phases where there's like nobody calling, nobody reaching out, and you're like trying to figure out what to do. And so it was nice to have that backup of running the studio. And yeah, this is like some of the work that I was doing while running that studio, which was just a lot of fashion stuff, and then a lot of environmental artist portraits. I met a lot of artists living in New York, going out, networking, talking to people about what they do, and kind of been obsessed with like the idea of like the maker and what it takes to be the maker. Going back to and like what it's like to be in your space and see other people's creative workflows in different mediums. Probably why I jump around from so many things, like from graphic design to photography to woodworking to making lamps to ceramics. I'm just kind of fascinated by the creative process and the way in which people make things. So yeah, I quit the studio in May. Very scary. But that was a good check. What am I doing? And went into producing, which is what that cover was. If you want to look back or forward a few steps, that fashion cover. I got into producing and light directing. So all the while doing photography. Sometimes you're asked to take the photos. Sometimes you're asked to light the photos. So in these instances, on these types of projects, I'm helping the photographer achieve really nice lighting. And the next slide would be something more like producing. There I am in a video. I was also modeling, I guess. In that one. And producing is kind of a different thing. You're definitely treated more as a creative, but your job is to hire people, which I think was a really interesting wrinkle to add into my repertoire, which was learning how to find different people that achieved different things for a photo shoot: hairstylists, makeup artists, stylists, styling assistants, production assistants, videographers, film loaders, the whole 9 yards. Finding those people, making them want to jump on board for projects that maybe either paid a lot of money or paid no money. And the challenge was all the same: finding the right people for it, and make sure that they gelled with the rest of the crew, with the creative crew, and producing, high level with high visibility talent, projects. And so that was kind of the next wrinkle that I added in, learning how to find the right people, how to connect and communicate with people, all the while kind of still rounding out the rest of my skill set. And so I think that kind of leads me into what I want to talk about today, which is just kind of what makes a creative person hireable, what I look for when I'm hiring someone, and how that translates to you guys. Which, you're going through the design program. They're going to teach you how to think like a designer, how to think in systems. But outside of that, there's really not much guidance, and I think that's probably from a legal perspective of like how to make money and like how to pay for your bills and how to balance all of that. You've got your own personal life that you're having to deal with. Maybe you're dealing with your own personal issues outside of your personal life that are like, more interpersonal with other people. And then you've got your career and the direction you want to take it, and the type of work you want to be making. And then you have the reality, which is sometimes you're not really doing the things that you want to be doing, and so you have to make do with that. And so yeah, this is kind of what this chat is going to be geared towards, and it's more advice for myself. I feel like I went through the last talk and I realized that the talk was more for me than it was for any of you guys. It was like everything that I needed to button up on in my life, I was talking to everyone on over Zoom. And so this is kind of a little bit of that. And so if you want to skip over to perfect. So this is advice from me, but it's really for me. So it's, the first thing I want to talk about is kind of, the overarching theme that I find myself going back to when I'm struggling in my career is that most of the issues stem from not being organized, whether that be time management, whether that be funds, paying taxes, whether that be file management, final, V2 final. And whether it be my communication and like setting up expectations with the client or making sure things are delivered on time, those types of things were always kind of coming back around and teaching me new lessons. And so, yeah, I want to talk a little bit about what makes you organized and how that kind of affects you as a creative. Whether that is being freelance, I'm talking a lot from the perspective of being a freelancer, but I think that this really translates to whether you're at a 9 to 5 or you have a salary position, you're permanent, you're freelance, your contract, whatever the case may be. I think this is essential for anybody that's in this field where you're expected to deliver at a high level. So first thing being file management. How are you organizing your files? How are you making a plan to deliver said files? Does that look professional to deliver the files that way? Are you sending them on a CD-ROM? Are you sending them on a USB drive? How are we delivering these files? Your finances, how are you sending an invoice? Does it look good? Does it look like you can put a credit card information on that page and like you're not going to get your information stolen? Those are important things. And then like, how are you sending an email? Are you sending an email to a client like it's a text message, or are you sending it like it's an email and it's formal and you respect that person's time and energy? So going to the next slide. First thing about file management is that you can always be more organized. I'm not organized, but I try to be. And like I said, in freelance, there's kind of these moments where you're really overwhelmed, you've got a lot going on, and you have to have grace for yourself. And so sometimes things slip through the cracks. You got to have the final version too, because you just got to crank it out and get it done. But just reminding yourself to kind of get back to your tenets of organization is really important. So the 3 things I have for you, next slide, is to create a naming system for yourself, stick to it, and back up all of those files. What I mean by creating a naming system is no matter what project I'm working on, it's going to have the same 4 values. It's going to be the date, it's going to be an underscore, it's going to be the project. If the project is ongoing, it's got to have some sort of tag so that I know it's ongoing. And then those files that are going to be there, where are they living and how am I going to find them? They can't just be loose anywhere. They need to be in folders, and those folders need to have subfolders, and the subfolders need to have subfolders. And that's how I kind of go about staying organized, because the last thing you want is you sending the wrong file to the client. And you're like, oh, I thought this was the final version, but I actually added a little bit of grain to it, and I want to send you another one. They're like, what's going on here? So yeah, staying really organized with those subfolders is really important. And then backing up your files. So I have a little aside. In 2020, right before the pandemic, I had a great year. 2020 really rocked. I had all my work for the design program. At this point, I was already in the program on a hard drive, and that hard drive was my working hard drive. It didn't have any space on my laptop, and I worked off of that. And I thought, that's fine. It's got all my photography, it's got all my design work. It's all in one place. It's great. And then I left my bag in the back of my car in Midtown and went out for coffee for about 30 minutes. Came back, car windows broken, laptop's gone, hard drive's gone, my entire work for the semester gone, and no place to find it elsewhere. And so, as you can imagine, first of all, it's a heartbreak. Second of all, it's the realization that you've lost all of your work. And then trying to figure out a way to recover it. Oh, I have some stuff on iCloud. Hence, I come from a place of I've been there, I've done it, I've made all the bad mistakes, and I've recovered from it. But I still continue making some of these mistakes. I don't have files backed up in 3 places. I have it in 2. And I need to have it in 3. But it's one of my mentors tells me 1 is none, and 2 is 1, and 3 is 2. You have it backed up in one place, you might as well have it backed up nowhere, because the second that place is gone or that thing fails, you're done. You got 2, all right, well, you have a backup for 1. But what if the second one fails? and your backup gets stolen, and you go to use your original backup for your backup, and it doesn't work. So having 3 is like the best way to cover your butt in case of that situation. But yeah, take it from me. I learned it the hard way. Definitely invest $50 on a crap SD. No, actually, don't buy a crap one. Invest in quality. Get an SSD. Understand that solid state drive is not meant for long-term storage. Everyone thinks like, oh, SSDs are so fast, they're so good. That's great. Get an SSD, but also invest in like something that's a solid or a long-term storage solution like a RAID. RAIDs are great. They're inexpensive relative. I mean, obviously we're students, so we gotta be budget conscious, but figuring out something that doesn't break the bank, but that can hold your files for a long period of time that you can go back to and know that like, hey, it's been 10 years, but I know this thing still works. As long as there's electricity running to it, it works. The next thing is finances, and I'm not gonna like, I'm gonna kind of breeze over finances because I think I covered this pretty well in my last session. So if you guys want to know about the finances of being a freelancer, I think I covered it pretty well, and this is actually just a carryover from that presentation. It's just understanding, the tax system in the state that you're going to be operating under. Understand that if you're going to be operating as a freelancer, figuring out the levels of protection you have as a freelancer. In New York, we have this law called freelance isn't free, where like in 30 days, if you're not paid by law, you have to get paid, and if they don't want to pay, you get the state involved, and they take care of the rest. So understanding those things, figuring out what the difference is between a business account and a personal account. It's really easy to fall into the trap of like, once you get out of this program and into the real world and you start taking out small clients, like, I'll keep it all organized. And things start flying, you start taking on more projects, you don't know where the receipts are, you don't have any system to keep your receipts organized. And next thing you know, you're like, okay, this Amazon charge could be for, the video games that I purchased last month, or it could be for something I needed for a client project, like something to do some interesting type manipulation or whatever the case may be. So having those things separated means that you can have a business account, you can have a debit or credit card associated with that business account, and anything that you spend your money on is now separate. It's in its own account. The money in is all the money that you're getting from your clients, not $50 that you got for your friend that covered drinks the night before. And it's all separated from your personal finances. I think that was like the biggest thing that leveled me up when I started freelancing. And yeah, I definitely looked into it. It's very easy. It's free to open a business account. It's free to open an EIN, which is basically a social security number for your business. So yeah, go back and reference that YouTube talk last time. And lastly, in the organization section, it's communication. I think a lot of us think we're really good communicators until you go back and you look at the paper trail. Have you ever looked back at an old set of text messages and you're like, how did anybody understand what I was saying in this text message? I find myself going back at old text messages and I'm like, first of all, I sound really boring and dull. I'm like, haha, yeah. I don't know, maybe I'm just reading myself wrong in retrospect, but I noticed that a lot of people think that they're over communicative, and the reality is you're either mediocrely or under communicating. So communication is a huge staple. It's, I think, what makes or breaks a good team, a good leader, and a good candidate. I think a lot of the people that I reach out to, case in point, today I had to find a new hairstylist for a shoot next week, and the person wrote the entire email in one run-on sentence. And the original email I kind of translated in my brain, and I was like, okay, you're free the 7th and the 8th and not the 9th. But you have a hold on the 9th. Okay, cool. No worries. We're gonna book you for the 7th and the 8th. And then she reaches out to me this morning and she's like, I'm sorry, you misunderstood me. I'm not free the 8th. I'm only free the 7th. And I was like, okay. Do you understand how, and I screenshot this block of text, so that is the most confusing thing ever. And she's like, yes, I understand. I was trying to type it manually at night, at 9 p.m. at night. I'm like, okay, well, let's learn from this. So I didn't hire, and what happens is I'm in a position of hiring this person, and now she's left a sour taste in my mouth where I'm like, okay, I know, first of all, you're unreliable in your communication. You're unreliable in your dates because you told it. Still, I read it back. She still told me she was up to 3%. I hold very firm on that. And now I no longer am feeling the same way I felt prior to reaching out to her about hiring her and for future projects. And like whether or not I want to hire her for a future project, that is going to be in the back of my mind. And so communication is really important. The way in which you have set up your email etiquette. Do we know how to BCC someone? Do we know how to reply all to something? If somebody is CCing somebody into a thread of emails and they're adding them in, they're saying, hey, this person needs to be, it's crucial that they're in this communication. And you reply just to that single person, that means that that person is the only person getting that reply to your email. And so now you look silly because that person is like, I have to re-CC all of the people I originally CC'd into this email so that they understand what's going on. And like little things like that, I don't think are taught in school. Like we don't see that. And I email so many like potential candidates for positions and they'll reply to just me. And then I'll be talking to somebody that's on a project with me that I added into the email and they're like, I don't know what you're referencing. I don't remember them ever saying that. And you're like, oh yeah, they replied just to me. They didn't reply to you. And the communication breakdown happens so quickly, and it can be make or break a project. It can make or break, you know, whenever you see something go wrong on like MTV or like the Super Bowl, you're like, that's probably somebody that just replied to one person instead of replying all on an email, and that was the difference maker as to why the fireworks didn't go off one time. I'm serious. Another thing is going. Oh, sorry. That was good, anticipatory, but yeah. Your signature, what does that look like? What are you adding into your signature? What type of information are you adding? Are you linking to your Instagram? Are you linking to your website? Do you have a portfolio? Some people link like the latest thing that just released for them. If you worked on a project that got some press, like sometimes people link that. You have to consider what's going to get people interested in the work that you're doing when you're emailing or when you're replying to an inquiry from the client. I think it's keep it really simple, but some people think that otherwise, and that's, you know, your marketing intuition. Whatever you think is going to make people interested in the work that you're doing, consider that. Everything should be considered. And lastly, be ready to send decks. I think the most important thing that I've learned, and it's like, call it arrogance, call it whatever you want to call it. I think we work so hard on our portfolios and on our websites that we think like, well, it's all there. You know, they just gotta go look at this case study for this UX thing that I did, and like they'll understand perfect. I just realized I'm cutting you guys all off. I think that if these guys just look at my case study, they'll understand my like what I'm about, what my design prowess is like. And the reality is, if somebody is reaching out to you with a very specific ask for a design project or for any type of creative projects that you're doing motion, and you're like sending them to your catch-all portfolio website, which has everything that you've ever done creatively on it, they're going to be like, this is great, but I want to see specific examples about the work that I'm asking about. And it comes across sometimes as lazy when, you know, somebody's asking you, hey, do you have any experience in, you know, type design? And you send them something completely different, a portfolio that has something completely different in it. And so I think the biggest closer for a client or a job is sending a specific deck that's made specifically for the person that you just reached out to. Have something pre-made in InDesign or in Figma, whatever the case may be, and just change the name of the person and just add in the screenshots from the projects that make sense for what they're asking for. And they'll feel so special. They'll feel like, oh my gosh, this was so fast, that this person must work the fastest in the world. And they don't know that it's a template that you already pre-made, but they feel a lot more special and they feel like you care. And I think that that's a really important element. Like all of these things that I'm showing you is like, just care a little bit about your work and people will feel it. Lastly, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I was asked to talk about work-life balance. I'm the worst person to talk about work-life balance because I just came off a flight yesterday after taking on a job that I didn't have to take that almost made me late to the airport to get here. And then I'm getting I'm here to see my nephew, who was born 2 weeks ago, and which was thank you. And I'm flying back Sunday on a red eye and going straight from the airport to a week-long shoot. So I am in a very weird place in life where I have consciously chosen to choose work over life. And it's kind of what led me to leave my previous position. But I think it's kind of in a place where I'm like, I'm building. I feel like I'm building something. So it's nice to be in the, like, swinging the pendulum more into the work portion of the work-life balance. But yeah, it's kind of a recognition that work-life balance is a balance beam. It is a pendulum that swings in both directions. It's never going to be perfectly balanced. And you kind of have to work really hard to make your work-life balance a balance. So this is kind of like my tenets for creating a good work-life balance. It's being like completely honest and auditing your day. How much time are we spending on Instagram Reels or TikTok in the morning when you should be brushing your teeth and getting your hair done? Are you budgeting your time realistically? And then, like, you know, there's your non-negotiables. Like, I have to commute to work. It takes me 45 minutes to get to work. All right. It takes, you know, it's an 8-hour shift, but realistically, I'm going to stay an extra 15 minutes past. So there's 9 hours out of my day. I got another 45-minute commute. I got to make myself dinner. I got to shower. And then what do you have left? You got to sleep. And then what, you know, how much time do you realistically have left in your day? And how are you going to budget that? If you're not an early riser, then you know that, you know, you're going to crawl out of bed and immediately go straight to work, you know, then that means that you need to backload the rest of your day if you want to, like, chip into building a better portfolio or leveraging the work that you're currently doing. But you have to be really intentional about that and be strict with it, or else you won't make any progress towards that goal. And so that all kind of goes down to, like, being honest with yourself and being really realistic. Like, I buffer in a lot of grace periods for myself because I know that it's what keeps me sane on a, like, busy work week. Like, I love the sauna. The sauna is like my haven. I have a sauna in the gym that I go to, and if it's up to me, I'm going to sauna. But also I need to stay hydrated, so I can't do that every day. But yeah, I like budget that in for myself. I budget in the gym, and that is important to me. But you have to be really honest about what your values are and what you prioritize. Some of you might be musicians, and you go, okay, well, I want to practice an hour of guitar or an hour of piano at the end of the day. That's fine. To what end is that budgeting, you know, going for? And if you're really in a place of, like, you want to build towards something and you want to create, you know, you want to leverage the job that you're currently in to get a cooler design job, think about, you know, the time that you're going to be spending on it. And some things aren't realistic. Some people, you know, have kids, or some people have a relationship that they need to invest their time into. But as long as you're realistic with it and you go, okay, you know what? I've been really real with myself. I've got 2 hours a day that I can use, or 2 hours a week that I could use. All right, put that in your schedule. Set a reminder for it. Break it up into 30-minute periods and say, okay, I'm going to chip away at, you know, this type design project that I've been working on the side, or this you know, series of posters that I've been working on. All those things are really important. I think those passion projects are what keep you going. But making sure that you're realistic about your overall schedule for a week or a day is the difference maker for me. Which goes to the next thing. Yeah, it's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, which is honesty hour. How many people think that they're honest with themselves, like currently? All right, that's pretty what I expected. I think a lot of people, my philosophy, and this is my is that people aren't as honest with themselves as you think. Like, people think that, like, I'm really honest with myself. I know exactly what I need to get done. And I think that a little bit of that is, like, protecting yourself. And you're like, I know exactly how many hours a day I'm on my phone. When you go and look at your screen time, you're like, oh, never mind. I thought it was 3, but it's 7, you know? And what does that 7 break down to? But yeah, being completely honest with yourself, and, you know, taking away any of the societal pressures and saying, okay, what do I need to improve in terms of, you know, if we're talking about work-life balance, in terms of our time management, Communication wise, you know, we talk about in the design program, I know Mario talks about it, leaving your ego at the door. Like, how much of our ego are we adding into this design? Let's be really real with ourselves right now. I'm really gung-ho about this treatment that I want to do to the poster that I'm working on, and nobody else is jiving with it, but I'm really stubborn. Let's be honest about those things. And so when it comes to a job, that honesty kind of like permutates into like what type of values do you have? Like, do you value your time? Do you value the relationships that you have at that job? Do you value the social status of that job? Some people want a really cloudy job that, you know, a specific design group that sounds really cool and that's working on cool projects, and that's really important to you. That's great, but just be very realistic about what you're valuing, and that'll help you guide yourself for a new job. You know, if you know that, hey, I really want to work on sports related stuff like a Nike or Adidas or an Under Armour type of client, and it's really important for me to be next to, you know, sport adjacent, then that is at least your North Star guiding you. Okay, well, let me go and create a comparative analysis to the types of people that have those jobs, and then I can know how to, you know, make my portfolio. But if you're just like coming out of the design program, and you're like, the design program has prepped me enough with my portfolio currently that I'm just good to go, and I'm just going to go apply for Under Armour, chances are you probably aren't going to get that job because you didn't do any type of work or like recognition to curtail like or like fine tune your portfolio for that type of job. And so they're looking at you like, yeah, you're really well rounded, but like I see nothing of this that like really can translate to this brand, right? And so that honesty hour being like, okay, this is just, you know, my portfolio is really well rounded in this department. I'm great at type, but I really want to be good at like image manipulation, and spend your time on image manipulation in your portfolio rather than like, you know, this thing that you're already good at. Like if you're already decently good at that, then work on your weaknesses, right? Work on that left hand basketball. And then boundaries, you know, like knowing where, you know, you'll stop the like, we're talking about work-life balance. Some people I work with, they're like, it's 10 p.m. I'm no longer working on anything. And we're on a tight deadline, and they set that boundary, and you have to respect it. And you go, okay, I understand, you know, 10 p.m. is your cutoff. We're gonna have to work around that, or we're gonna have to find somebody else. And to some people, that it's worth them losing that job and like keeping their peace, setting that boundary. And this all goes back a little bit to the communication portion. It's like if you don't communicate it, then you're just gonna be like a very resentful person. You're like, like, you know, like curmudgeon, like working at 10:05, like on something that you don't want to work on. It's like, well, you kind of did it to yourself by not communicating it. So understanding what those values are lead you to your boundaries too. And then communicating them is really what makes you a valuable asset to a team and a valuable working partner. I think the worst partners that I've had are like the types of people that like have really strong boundaries, but they don't communicate them. And then they're just like pissed at you, and you're like, okay, well, we have to get this thing done. And like, it's too late now. You weren't proactive about your communication, and now we're in this thing because you chose not to communicate. And so, yeah, I mean, I hope this is kind of helpful to you in terms of finding the right like guidance and the right like track for the type of work that you want to be going for. But feel free to ask any questions. I know that I rambled for a little bit there, but I ramble every time. But yeah, I'd be really curious to hear, like, you know, if some of you are working right now while going through school, what that experience is like, what the pain points are for you. I know I see a university union, you might be working at the union. What that type of environment looks like for you, and what values you've kind of taken out of that and said, okay, I'm really enjoying this, and I'm not enjoying this. How do I deal with a difficult employee or a difficult coworker? Yeah, just let me know. I'm curious to hear what your guys' specific issues are. I feel like you get too far away from school, and I don't even know what's going on. Any questions? All right, whatever, it's fun.
I don't have any questions, but I am saying
sick.
I work as the graphic design for my community engagement center, so making the flyers and Instagram posts and stuff like that put out. And I've been working a lot with getting feedback and not getting upset at it because it's a little hard. At least today I had a bit of a difficult situation because of miscommunication in terms of what I'm allowed to use in terms of colors and stuff on social media. And I was told it looks too good for you.
Gotcha.
And I'm like, tell me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay. I see that. There's a few like things I'd love to attack about that. Do you have a brand book or some sort of a style guide
That's
for
what
it?
they sent me today.
Okay,
So
well that's
we've been
great.
Going over that extensively. This communication, I think, came from certain designs being okay. The colors are not approved in that brand book, but I was told that they're okay.
So an issue there could have been that like you probably were off course earlier, but no, people were lazy and they didn't see it, and then they retroactively are like, "Why are you doing this?" And you're like, "I've been doing this. What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit of that. It's a little bit of like a lesson learned that now that you've been burned by this, you're probably never going to go into a project and go and not ask for a brand new one, right?
Yeah.
So like think about that from a positive. Flip that on the positive. Like now I know I'm never going to go into a project without asking for a style guide or a brand book, which is a great lesson to learn in real time. And then the next thing is like you're going to audit that brand book and you're probably going to say this.
It does. I don't like it, but it's getting.
And so that's a new lesson and a new challenge that you're going to learn to either love or hate, and like that's going to help with. Oh, sorry, thank you. But that defining your values and what you value in a work environment, and you're like, okay, I want to be pushed creatively, or I want to be the one to push within the creative limitations. We talk about this all the time. I have a client right now. Oh, Gilbert, what's good? We talk a lot about this with, I have a specific client who will remain nameless, but they're a large hat company in the sports world. And their issue is that like they're very kind of adverse to change. They don't like change. They have a very specific vision. And we talk a lot about it at the production and agency level is like everything has to move 10% of the time. So it's like, if I want to make something better and cooler, I know 100% the direction to take it, but I know that I can't swing that far. I can't add that color that you're mentioning, like full tilt, but I know that I can move it 10% this direction without raising any alarms. Figuring out what those little 10% movements are going to make you way more excited about your job. And they're going to make you look better too, because you're improving something and they don't really know exactly what it is because it's only 10%. They're like, this looks better. This looks cleaner. And I don't know why. It's like, yeah, that's because I did it. Right?
Yeah.
I'm doing it my way, right? So those little elements will make you more engaged in your job because let's face it, community engagement at the library, sometimes I'm sure you're challenged by like making it exciting and fun for yourself. And so you've got to find those little ways to make it exciting, or else you're gonna have to like, you'll eventually be like, all right, I just got to fun. And so it's you either let it make you or you let it break you. And I think that you have the personality, and I can already tell the way you're taking on some of the feedback that I feel like you're gonna like kill whatever it is you do next while you have the brand book, and you might find it more exciting and enjoyable. So yeah, good luck to you. Any other questions? Okay.
So is that more of like a type of like ask for forgiveness more than ask for permission, or like where is like a good point to be like pushing it before you're like have to start like explaining it? Is it like depending on the client, or is it like a good way to like sort of navigate that situation?
Yeah, I mean, this is like a conversation for like even another talk, because it can kind of go on like ad nauseum, like really forever. It's really just like a feel thing, and that feel is experience, obviously. Like you kind of can sense what your client wants and what they need, and that comes from your research. Like if you're working with a client, you're doing research on the client. You know what their competitors are. You see where whatever the market is for whatever it is that they're selling or whatever it is they're promoting, and you know roughly the direction in which you want to take something to make it cool and interesting for yourself. And so it is like kind of a feel thing of like, where is that 10% coming from is kind of the challenge that I bring to you, Tyler. It's like, you'll know that something's that something's off in the design or in a photograph or like in a style guide, and you'll say, okay, I know that I can't, let's just say that it's a color balance issue, you know, it's leaning too in this direction when the reality is like the client really wants something more earth tony, but it's actually a little bit too primary colory. You can like kind of decide, I'm gonna, for this particular project or this design, like desaturate by literally 10% this color white and see if they notice it. And then you kind of just keep tweaking, keep tweaking, you go, oh, okay, you know what? The corners on a lot of these things are really like harsh. Let me round them and see if they notice anything. Like I'm just gonna add like a quarter-inch round to the border of this image and see what they say. And present it for round one revisions. Don't like send it in as the final and then be like yelled at. But just like kind of like loft it up. And if they say no, then you go, okay, I come back. And it's like you're trying not to awake the sleeping giant almost. You're like tiptoeing your way in. But it is a feel. It's 1000%. Like it's not gonna come to you immediately. You kind of have to like prod and find where you can kind of get away with being a little bit more creative and interesting. For us, like this client, like we do a lot of their e-commerce, so all their website photography, and we decided like, okay, the lighting needs to change a little bit. So we changed like the light that hits their face and the shirt was changed in direction a little bit. And we waited to see if they would notice on the round one. They didn't say anything. They said they liked it. It looked better. Great. We kept going with that. And then we said, okay, now we want to change the shadow and the harshness of the shadow on the other side of the person's face. Made it a little bit more dramatic. They said nothing to it. They said that they liked it. It felt like an improvement to the version before. You just kind of keep going until next thing you know, you look at where you were before you got the client and where you are currently, and you're like, this is a completely different style that we're shooting at. And so, yeah, it's 1000% being open in your communication. Like we tried a few different things. Let me know what you think. But it's also like intuiting, like where it is that you can kind of get away with it. Like if they're really hell bent on a certain part of their brand book, don't mess with it. But if you see opportunities elsewhere, definitely try it, risk it.
After some of the programming, I feel like we had a lot of creative freedom, but I've learned in the real world that you're not the one that makes the final design decisions, and so you have to learn not to get attached to your designs when you like go into it thinking like, this is amazing, this is the best, and then you're just gonna really get shot down. So until the end, that's when you should like be attached to your design.
Yeah,
so definitely not in the process because it'll hurt.
It'll hurt a lot. Yeah, I'm assuming you're like conjuring up a specific memory right now.
Yeah. It's happened.
Yeah, no, it does happen. I think, especially when you find something interesting and then you get shot down by a client, a lot of people get really discouraged. I have friends that we talk about all the time. We're like, I don't know why. Like, you'll see the final thing and you'll go and like text your friend like, oh my god, it looks so good. It came out on Instagram. Like, looks amazing. And like, client completely like butchered this. Like, this is my least favorite option. Like they went for something in a completely different direction. Love the outtakes, but I can't post any of them. And there's two ways you could take that. You could be like really bitter and like choose to kind of like sulk in it, or you could say, okay, now I know a really cool treatment for a client that's going to appreciate that in the future, or a project that's going to really serve it. So it's like it's not for nothing. You're not like taking 10 steps back. You're really just taking one step back to kind of take maybe 5 steps forward. And so I choose to kind of flip it on its head in the way in which I think about the work. I think that comes from like therapy and and like really taking a lot of time to reflect throughout the pandemic. I think the pandemic honestly helped a bunch for me to prep me for the real world because I got to slow down a little bit. I don't know if that's the same for you guys because you're just now getting back into school. But yeah, I think it has to do with perspective. It has to do with the way in which you choose to handle setbacks. But if you have the right mentality, you can kind of flip that, like, I didn't get the thing that I wanted, into, oh my god, I'm so excited to use this on the next thing. Which I know it sucks, but it'll come back around. Progress, what's going on?
I was just joining it.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, are there any questions?
There's nothing in the chat.
There's nothing in the chat. Shame on you, chat.
Oh, you have it open? Okay.
All seem like
Yeah, I remember that. I remember Gilbert used to fall asleep, but he had like the green screen, and it would always be something crazy. It'd always be like what was like your typical green screen background?
I think I had the Matrix computer.
But what happened is you would stir up, and then like out of the Matrix would emerge Gilbert. Like it would be insane. He would distract the hell out of me. I'd be like in the middle of talking. I'm like, Gilbert, are you waking? Are you awake? You're like, yeah, I'm here. Or just baked out of your mind. We won't talk about that. Good to see you. Yeah. Any other questions?
So sorry, I'm like
Turning my back on everywhere I look.
actually went to New York like after the Vancouver break.
Yeah.
How was that transition? Like, how did you go from like being like Sacramento to pretty much like putting yourself to the wolves? How was that transition? How did you like get to meet other people?
Yeah.
And like get out there and kind of like build your own
World. Yeah, great question. It was tough. It was really tough to start because I never left California, like to live anywhere. I only lived in California. I lived with my parents throughout the pandemic and through school. I had no real lifeline out there. I had friends that went to school out there, and I had like a distant uncle, and that was about it. And so it was really like the overarching like energy that I had about it was like, I'm gonna go make something of myself, and it's like I'm gonna go like find myself out in New York. And I think I got humbled really quick by reality of like, first of all, I thought I budgeted enough, and then the reality was like, no, like California prices are not New York prices, and that was the first portion of like the shock, which was like, okay, it's not realistic. The rent that I had initially budgeted for is probably going to be, 1.5 times or 2 times what I budgeted for based on California prices. Another thing is like the job market, while it is more fruitful over there, it's extremely competitive. Like everybody has the same idea as you. Tommy from Ohio and like Sabrina from New Jersey all want to live in the Big Apple, and they all want a design job, and they're all gunning for it. And so a part of you has to step it up. And so a good portion of my first 2 months was like learning what it is to like fake it till you make it, and like getting into these interviews, and the expectation of somebody fresh out of high school is to have 4 years of experience at a senior level, and it's like this isn't realistic. And so I'm like, okay, I either fake it or I'm not gonna get it. And so like early on, I was in an interview for a senior design position at a new media company that was a startup, and I was realizing, okay, like these people clearly, if they think I'm a candidate, don't know what they're talking about. And so now I need to convince them, now that I've like made it into advanced talks about being in this position, that I'm the right choice for it. Whether or not I feel qualified or not, just step up and sink or swim, And a lot of that taught me communication, taught me how to communicate my ideas. If you can't communicate your ideas and the vision that you have for somebody's brand, you're dead in the water. And on top of that, it taught me like to not take no for an answer. Like I was, getting rejected left and right, and I was also finding interesting ways to kind of keep my name in the mix. And I was like, okay, well, if this position is going to work out, I'm going to check it out every week and find out if there's anything new brewing, because like these new media companies, they're constantly realizing that they need more people. And if you're persistent and you're, you show that you care and you have some chutzpah about it, like they're gonna notice that. And I think the people that I've been in a few positions of like hiring people, I got into an art director position just based on a recommendation from a friend. If you are like very much like following up on emails, you're my favorite person ever. If you're like being persistent and say, I care about this, I didn't just like quick apply on LinkedIn and like looked up nothing about your company, like you're already 80% the way there. Like so many people just are quick applying and don't even think about how to speak to this company or speak to what their needs are. I learned that. And then in terms of like finding friends and community, there's just like the power of the internet. The internet's great. Use that wisely. Use Reddit. Use Instagram. Use Tumblr. Whatever the case may be. I was finding myself going to like Riso Club events. I was going to photography mixers. I was going to parties, and a part of it was teaching myself to like be confident in my presentation of myself. And like when somebody asks you what you do, like you're like, I don't just like dabble on the computer. I'm a designer. I do graphic design. I design posters. I do this. And saying it confidently, first of all, like it's an impression you're leaving on someone. Someone is like saying, like, oh, okay, cool. What type of work do you do? All of a sudden, you're in a conversation with somebody. They're interested to hear why you're so confident in the thing that you're talking about. And that presentation could lead to networking opportunities. The amount of times that like I'm just, I smile at someone and ask them how their day is going and introduce myself, and I find out that they're the person that's going to change the trajectory of my career. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm glad that I did that thing. Like I did a job for somebody on a favor for like $200. It was literally like not worth doing it, but it was because it was for a friend. I was like, sure, I will go and do this thing. I met a guy there. He was a producer. He needed somebody the following week that spoke Spanish, that was a photographer that could hang and go to a remote destination at a Four Seasons hotel that just opened up and take photos for an event. And I got to go do that and get paid to do that because I was nice to somebody and asked them what they did. And they asked me likewise, and I was confident about it. And so like all of those lessons came slowly, but they came from moving there and taking the chance. I don't think you need to move to New York to figure all that out. I know many people that have been like, they've come and visited me and they're like, this is great, this is not for me. But I think that there's a lot of things that New York has taught me that translate everywhere. No matter where you go, if you treat somebody nicely and you present yourself well and you dress well and you're kind and friendly and communicative, like there's a lot of doors that you can open up just by doing that. Rather than, I think another thing I will go on a rant on that I went on a rant on about last time I was on, there are so many people that we went into the design program with that were super antisocial, decided not to talk to anyone, were very gatekeepy about the way in which they were designing things, and they didn't want to share information, and they're like afraid that, if you taught someone how to bitmap, that like all of a sudden they're going to steal all of your ideas. And the reality was like those types of people I see constantly on LinkedIn looking for jobs. And I'm not going to say it brings me joy. Like it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I'm serious. It doesn't. But like it was so predictable, and it's so funny because it's just like there were efforts made to make those people integrated into like our cohort and to try and be like a part of the community. But because of their behavior, it was very clear that like their job prospects were going to be limited, because how are you going to translate that into a design team? You say you get hired on as a junior designer and your senior designer is like, what are you working on? You're like, don't worry about it. Hello, like you have to learn how to communicate and work with the group, or just do it all by yourself, and like more power to you. But the way in which you communicate with your classmates and your cohort members is going to dictate how you communicate in the team. And so like be really mindful of the way in which like, you're treating your friends, you're treating like your classmates and feedback, and how you're receiving feedback, because all of that is going to translate 1000% into the workforce. So yeah, all of that was learned in New York and then some. But hopefully that answered a little bit of your question. Sorry, I rambled. Go for it.
We have a question in the chat. Someone wants to know some more advice about what to do at the networking mixers.
Sure.
They've been told to go to more, but don't know how to make the most of it.
My question to them would be, what is the energy you're carrying when you walk into the mixer? Are you like in the corner? Like, have you seen the meme of like, they don't know? They don't know. Like, are you like that? Like, they don't know I'm a sick designer.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't been asked the question yet. That would be my question. I am like, as much as I am like obviously like yapping away at you right now, I'm not like, I've been told I have an RBS, resting bitch face. And I didn't know that for the longest time. And on top of that, I do have a lot of social anxiety. Like it takes a lot out of me to go and be in these types of spaces. But I also recognize the value in them. So you kind of like push through. But what I would say like acutely to that person that's asking that question would be, practice those communication skills. If you feel like you're weak at the communication skills, maybe don't go to the networking event to do it, because like then you've got the pressure of like, oh, I want to like do something with this networking event. I hope I find a job there. But like, okay, when you walk into class the next day, try and like talk to somebody you've never talked to in class, or like never really like sparked a conversation. Ask them about their weekend and see how you act, because you being honest with yourself and being like, oh my gosh, I have no clue how to ask questions to people and hold a conversation and do small talk will teach you a lot about where you need to grow in communication. And therefore, like, you can kind of take those lessons, practice them a little bit more, and then go to a networking event and be like, okay, cool. Or maybe bring a friend, a buffer, somebody that can come with you, that you can chat with a little bit. You see something funny happen, you can kind of like relate to that funny thing happen with the person next to you, and all of a sudden you're in a conversation with them. You've created a group. Your group looks really cool because you guys are all dressed really cool. And now some more people come up and they're like, what do you guys do? And then next thing you know, you have like a ton of friends. I don't know if that's how that works, but it could work that way. The idea is that like, if you're not good at networking and good at communicating, you can't expect to go to that event and then immediately have that thing happen for you. You got to practice it. You got to work on it. And so, yeah, like those little exercises could be helpful. If you feel like you just naturally aren't that person, then maybe online networking could be a better opportunity for you. Somewhere where you could take your time, you can kind of like think about the message that you're going to send that person. Might be a little bit more helpful than like relying on this thing where you just know in your heart of hearts, like, I will never be a talkative person. Then you got to pivot and adapt to whatever your strengths are. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Any other questions? I realized I didn't like talk a lot about photography, but I kind of like sped through that to like yell at you. But yeah, if you guys want to know a little bit more about the work that I do, go for it.
Looking at Jason's question to that, because I'm curious to know, because it is like a pivot in the career that you kind of did, going from formal educational graphic design. So I'm curious to know what you gained through school, what was like formal strategies of like thinking, and how's that carried over to like.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I mean, photography is so like hand in hand with graphics. I don't think people sometimes understand like how much like at the commercial level photography yields itself to graphics. So a lot of the times that I'm working, like I'm finding myself communicating about like margins and empty space, things that will help for like, we're in a social world. So if I'm taking a photo and there's not enough, there's enough empty space for it to be a really good website banner on, on a desktop, but then I'm not considering how it's going to work, horizontally on mobile, I'm screwed. Like that's not a usable image for my client. So being super mindful of that, I think that comes from a design background. I don't think, unless you're a really savvy photographer, I don't think those people think that way, and they're just kind of, those other photographers are usually kind of expecting the client to just figure it out, and they have to do really silly workarounds to make that happen. Like they'll add a gradient, where a gradient does not need to exist to make the photo look good. And so I think that that's where I kind of use that design background as like a strength for me. Another thing is like communicating to the client. Like I'm at a point where I'm project managing for that apparel company, the hat company. And a lot of the times they're talking to us about the deliverables, and it's stuff that I'm not handling. I'm just handling the photography aspect of it, but I can speak to the design deliverables because I know about them. And so when they're talking about certain things in the thread that like aren't necessarily for me, but I can chime in and say, hey, you know what, we're going to adjust our approach from a photographic perspective to help you out with this particular sale that you're doing, and you need some extra imagery for it. I think it makes you look a lot more well-rounded to a client, and so that's always really helpful. But ultimately, I'm like kind of the philosophy that like all of your life experiences kind of culminate at once into the thing that you're working on. For example, like my first type project that I did with Richard Pratt was designing your own typeface, I believe. You can create your own typeface, you design a word, you have to have a certain amount of letters with the right types of characters. And I remember that I tapped into my biology and science background to create that typeface. I created a typeface based off Prince Rupert's drop. Do we know what Prince Rupert's drop is? We drop molten glass into water and it creates this crazy looking, like, I don't even know what to call it, like cephalopod style creature. And it's like indestructible except for at the tip of it. You snap the tip, it explodes into a million pieces. And I use that form to kind of create like all of the ends of certain letters. And that was like a perfect example of like, oh my gosh, all this like research and this time that I spent is all for naught. Like I will eventually get to use like the little nerdy parts of like my previous career in my design career. And then when I got out of design and into photography, I was able to tap into both for my photography career. And so like this is all kind of goes back to like that optimistic philosophy of like it's never like 10 steps back. Like no, even if you're having to pivot your job, like you know, say you took on a design role and it no longer is paying bills, you got to go like flip burgers. There's going to be something at flipping burgers at Burger King that's going to inspire your next design project. That's just my philosophy. But you have to think about it that way. And you have to look at it that way. If you don't have that type of perspective, then like you're going to be blank brain staring at a piece of paper trying to think of a new design. But yeah, it just kind of it depends on how you see your influences. Like I think the best passion projects that I work on come from like my own brain and my own experiences and my lived experiences. Some people are really imaginative and like can think of things on the spot and it has nothing to do with their life experiences. I'm just not that way. I kind of tap into that, and that's how I make like photographs, and that's how I make designs and art in the world. So it just kind of depends on how you approach your art practice. Are you a designer? Are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Designer.
It was tough, right? It was tough to present yourself that way. That was like perfect example of like I was like, "Are you a designer?" And he's like, "Had to think about it." And it's like when you enter a room and you introduce yourself, like the difference maker between somebody being like, "Ooh, I want to know more," and like, "Okay, cool, all right, talk to you later," is truly how the confidence that you carry when you present yourself. And so, not to say that I'm not going to want it. I'm not interested in what you have to say.
Can I be honest with you? The reason why I paused was because I just went through the program. That was the GRIDS code. That's the last
Oh,
year.
word.
So I was
My
like,
bad. I'm like, oh yeah, I recognize you.
yeah. It was through Zoom, so I was like,
Yeah. You're like, yeah, I talked to you last time. Yikes, my bad. No, but yeah, it's just like it's interesting to see like even in like that short interaction what that like it's a perfect audit into how are we talking about ourselves and how are we presenting ourselves. I'm not saying I'm perfect in it. I'm definitely not perfect in it, but like sometimes I'll be like kind of gauging whether or not I actually want to get into talking about when I work with somebody too. So be like, are you a photographer? You're like, you seem like you're gonna be annoying. So no. No, I'm not. I don't do anything actually. So, but yeah, I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Like, if you want me to dive into something more specific, I can. But yeah, I'm like constantly trying to find a way to integrate like graphic design into my work. For example, like before I even got into the program, I made a photo book. And I wanted to get into the photo program and the graphic design program and double major. And so I went and I presented to Richard Pratt. He's like, yeah, this is cool. I like this. And I went and presented to the photo major and he's just like, you're trying to do what? No, you can't do both. Like you either are with us or you're against us, basically. And I was like, all right, well, Richard's my guy now. And I'm going to be a graphic designer. And but I was constantly thinking about how like photos lend themselves to just take over on the photos lend themselves to a spread, right? Like when I'm thinking about this, like this was obviously for this presentation, but there's something interesting to like the position of this portrait. That's right. I was gonna say, but you guys can see. The position of this portrait versus the close-up. I personally think like I don't even need to have a picture of a person to tell the story about who that person is. Like that in and of itself is important. Like in my philosophy of like what portraiture is, it's like this tells me everything I need to know about this person without ever showing their face. But like I think about them in spread, and it's like it's really fun to like push in and pull out, and the sequencing of photos is really important to me. And so I'm constantly thinking about photography and this, the user experience. You know what I mean? And like the way in which somebody's going to read something, and what experience am I trying to push through to someone who's seeing my images using design tenets, like using the design form factor, which is like, we know we're going to read something left to right. If something's bigger, it's going to capture our attention. There's something graphic on it, that's the first thing that we're going to go to. And then if there's something white, it says, okay, this is important. We got to look to whatever is in the center of it. And then figuring out how to break those systems and, you know, introduce something interesting like a little GIF in the bottom corner and be like, oh, that's fun. Like, it's not the first thing I'm going to look at, but it's certainly something I want to take a look at some point in my hierarchy. Those little things I consider all the time and I enjoy playing with, and like, it's a perfect example of like, the designer in you will never leave. Once you've learned the thing, you'll never unsee, you know, Comic Sans. You'll never unsee, you know what I mean? Like once you've learned it once, like if you care about it, you will see it everywhere, and you will care to change it whenever you have a chance to. So yeah, that's my philosophy on it. I'm a little outside. They're back there. That's my philosophy on everything design photo. Paints a better picture.
You literally just talk about semiotics with like that photo that you showed before, where they're still implicitly implied and understand something, communicate something without being explicit.
Absolutely, and it's like if you go back like 4 slides to some of the India. One more. Sorry. Like something like this, where I'm kind of playing with a grid system / like subframing. Like just constantly when I'm doing event photography, I'm trying to figure out how to like make interesting layers of people. Like sometimes you're asked to go into a room and make the most boring like party with 5 people look like the most crowded place ever. Are you a photographer?
I do a little bit of photography.
Do you do the nooners?
Some events at the union where there's a small crowd, you gotta get.
Do you do the nooners? You do my old job.
I don't take the photos for them.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say because
I do the posters.
you do the posters. Okay. I used to do the photography at the union for.
We now have like assigned photographers that just focus on photography. So
Yeah, that's right. That's what I did. I was just the assigned photographer for it.
Aaron
And-
says hello.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's.
Oh
Kenji
wow!
says hello. Everybody says hello.
Damn, warmed my heart. I used to go into those nooners and they're like, nobody ever told me, but I knew that they wanted it to look like it was the most poppin' thing ever. And it was such a challenge to make it like look that way because there's literally 2 people, or like it's like on the lawn and there's like 2 people like somewhat eating lunch near it, and I'm like, they're fans, and you have to like go up and like try to take photos, and that all has to do with framing. Like I'd get behind them. And I'd shoot with a super long lens so that everything would feel really compressed, and it looks like they're right there up on the stage, but they're not even close. And so like all of those considerations, I think, come from that experience of like being a designer and understanding like how you need to activate space to hold people's attention. Like they all play a role in my photography, whether I'm like overtly thinking about it or where it's like really in my subconscious. I just know it needs to be this way, and this is how the photo is going to feel right. But yeah, it's like it has everything to do with semiotics. It has everything to do with like the hierarchy that we talk about so much. And yeah, it also has to do with aesthetic. Like some people like a minimal photo. Some people will take a photo of like a car on the street with like a house in the distance and like one tree, and it's like, oh, beautiful, picturesque. And there's other people that are like, the front corner of this car and just the headlight is the most beautiful thing ever, and I don't have to focus on anything else. And both of them are right, and that's the beautiful thing about art. Yeah, I've rambled for too long. So like, we can end this. Thanks, guys. If you guys want to stick around and ask me more questions, feel free. Let's go around and applause. Dude, isn't it crazy? Like one of our good friends just got married. I literally just saw her on Monday.
Yeah.
A former GRIDS member came and visited me in New York, and I told her I was going to be there, and then I found out when she was texting me like, "Hey, when are we meeting up?" that I was not going to be there because I was coming here, and then I felt really bad because separately her boyfriend, now fiance, texted me weeks prior, helping me plan her proposal. And I was like, holy crap, I forgot about one of the most important things that's happening to her life. And I managed to squeeze in the dinner and see her. And then I mentioned to everyone in our group chat after I saw that I was going to be at GRIDS. And then immediately after in the group chat, I was like, I'm going to be in Sacramento. I'm going to be like talking at GRIDS. And immediately after is a photo of her with like a wedding ring. I'm like, all right, nobody's going to remember the previous section meeting at GRIDS because she just got married. Yeah, you know. Sick. All right, thanks, guys.
For coming. We have a sign-in sheet up front, submitted, we'll have your attendance.
Am I on video?
Tomorrow we're doing the live day.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Oh, we should get to the Zoom. Can I ask if you have any information?
This one, boots. I saw them the second one.
They're so fun.
They look sick. What do you mean by that? Instagram? Or...
Instagram or something to get in contact with.
Yeah, absolutely. My Instagram has my website. My website has my email.
I actually still haven't reached out. I'm trying to see if
How did you go?
hopefully soon, but if not,
I'm super responsive to email. That was just like copy paste. But I think it out or part-time. And then I put it in part-time. And I lifted one side of the series.
Thank you so much for the advice.
I'm gonna remember red boots. If you just mention red boots in the email, I'll remember.
I got you.
It's not. They're never bad. Nothing's bad. Nothing's bad.
I had that and I had this morning I made that. Last night I did that.
No. I feel like it's